guys, welcome back to Heartcore. That name is going to have a completely different meaning today with today's topic. I'm Cel, that's Miko. What's up, girl?
Hey everyone.
Hey, just hey. Got it. Cool. So today, as I alluded to not 15 seconds ago, we are talking about hearts, heartcore, the ego center, the heart center, ego authorities, literally the premise of this entire podcast. It's taken us almost 60 episodes to get here, but we are talking about the ego authority as the main authority, our mutual authorities. And we were just doing the stats. I think we ran this in like one of the first episodes of like the percentage of me and Miko meeting as two ego authority people, her being a projector, me being a manifestor, but we like talked about it again. And it's literally less than like a 1% chance that this exists in the world, which is insane. And that we met. So excited to talk a little bit more about the ego center, the heart center today. And we're going to break it down for you so that you guys not only understand the authority itself, but understand the center itself. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the heart as a whole. Well, but we've left Love Month. Have we really left Love Month if we're talking about the ego center / heart center? Not really.
It's like the crossing the bridge. The ego center, we thought it was a good crossover between months.
We just can't get out of February, apparently.
Nope.
So, without further ado, would you lead us into the depths of the heart?
Yes, thank you for the intro. So, I'm going to first show what the ego center is, or where it is located if you don't know yet. But if you're all the way up to episode 60, I'm sure that you have a bit of knowledge as to where the centers lie. And if you're watching, you can see right now that there is the red triangle in between the emotional solar plexus and the G center that is colored in, and that is the ego center. So it's called the ego, the heart, or the will center. We're going to be starting with the open ego today, just for you to get an understanding of what the heart center means in all of its facets, because if you have it defined, you are also influencing everyone around you with your willpower, with your ego and your heart. And that is very important to understand and to know, because just because you work in a certain way doesn't mean that everyone around you works in that way. It is actually extremely unlikely that people around you even understand what you're on about when you have it defined, because it's only around 35% of the population that has this heart center defined. And if you are an ego authority, so an ego manifestor or an ego projector, those are the only two types that can have the ego as an inner authority, then it is from these 35% approximately, less than 1% chance, like maybe 0.5%, that you are this inner authority. So finding people that can resonate with this is very rare. And the open heart center, it means that there are no gates coming out of this heart center. So it is completely open, and it would be white in your chart, not colored in. There wouldn't be any gates that are colored in a hanging manner. That's what they're called when you have one gate without the other side of the channel being connected. So it's completely open. And that means that you are here to really get wise about willpower, get wise about your worth, and really understand it in many different facets. So every single gate that is attached to a center will teach you a certain lesson. And you're here to become wise about all of these gates, because when you're first born, these are gates that are potentially very confusing to you, because you have no way into the heart center. So you don't have an anchor into this theme. And the theme of the heart center, it is about the material world, so financial wealth as well, but things that you can possess in this world. And it is also a will-dominated center, so it is about your willpower. Do you have it consistently or do you not have it consistently? And it is about your self-worth or having a need or a desire to prove yourself in a healthy way. That's when it's defined. When it's open, all of these things that I just mentioned are things that you need to become wise about, things that you need to learn about. So when you have a gate defined, we have a different kind of scenario because we have an anchoring point. So there are ways for you to start to get to know this willpower energy. But before diving into the undefined ego center, I would like Celestina to share a little bit about her experience regarding the completely open heart center.
So I did a bit of exploration in my files prior to coming on, and both my husband and my dad are completely open in their ego, which is so interesting. Miko has actually, you've met both of them. You've met both my husband and my dad. And I think from an outsider's perspective, I would say that my husband is living in the positive of his open ego, in the sense that he doesn't really let outside things affect him. And he's a sacredly defined being. But if he doesn't have the gut he's probably not going to do it. So there's no willpower in the equation until I'm in the mix, right? Like, he stayed up tonight to like hang out with me after I got out from work. And I'm decently positive that that was not like an internal thing, but that was like I need to wait up for Celestina kind of thing. So I feel like it only comes to me when I bring the heart into it. So it's really interesting to see someone who is so aligned or has learned enough in that center to know when it's his energy versus not his energy. Versus my dad, I have also noticed the same thing. Funny enough, my mom will give him like the honey-do list, right? And the last time I went back to visit my parents, my dad had put off painting or like repainting a wall for literally months. And as soon as I came back, he had the willpower to do it, which I think is hilarious, but also so makes sense. So for my dad, it's interesting because I think that there may be a bit of conditioning there, like the not good enough, not worthy enough side of things. But when it comes down to willpower, I can tell you that I bring all of his willpower, which is, again, just so interesting. So if you guys are the egos in your family, if you do bring the heart into your family or into relationships, kind of notice those dynamics, especially if it's like you're the child and they're the parent, or you're in a partnership or relationship. Kind of notice those little intricacies that may happen when you are present or your energy is going to be coming into that space. It's just very interesting to witness, and I don't think I noticed it until maybe the last like 3 to 5 years, like since being on my human design journey. Miko, are you the only ego-defined person in your family unit as well?
No,
You're not.
my mum also has the ego
Really?
defined. So,
Okay,
and you can
cool.
feel it. To me, you can feel when someone really has it defined, and she does a lot with her willpower. So, yeah, definitely, definitely there. And also, now that we've kind of scratched on that, I feel like we can also mention just to be very mindful if you are a parent of a child that doesn't have it defined, and if you do have it defined, not to place the same expectations onto them as you would have of you. So a defined ego can make promises if it's coming from their will. So if it really is something that they want to do from within themselves, then they can make promises. Even the defined ego should be mindful of which promises they make, of course, because these are things that you will want to follow through on. So making promises that you can't complete, you're not going to be happy about yourself, and you're going to strain your heart as well. But if you have it defined as a parent and your kid is undefined, don't request them to promise you things, because they're not here to do that. They're not here to promise you that they will be on time or that they will behave, for example. So it's really an unrealistic expectation that you're placing onto them. And they're also not here to be willful. So you can't make them do something out of sheer will. And I'm sure we have all heard it, but in our family, a lot of times from my grandparents, we would hear, okay, where there is a will, there is a way. And if you only put your will into it, if you really want something, then you can make it happen. Yeah, for 30 to 35% of the population, they can do that if they are choosing the right things to follow. So if you would say yes to something as a defined ego, but your heart's not in it, there's no point in doing that either. It's going to be extremely difficult to fulfill this promise. So yeah, I think that's a great place to mention about the influence as well that we have onto others.
I think it's also important to note that it can be familially, or as I've noticed, in work as well. I'm the only defined ego in the team that I have. However, I did just look at like my core team's charts, and I define their egos through the 40-37. Everybody, I define their egos through that channel. So it's very interesting that that's the case. So be aware if you are working in a team format and you have either you're an ego authority or you have your ego defined, notice where you bring that to the team, because I think that in particular will make a difference.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. If you are an ego projector, for example, and you have chosen the path of guiding others or supporting others in some way, or even if you're an ego manifestor and you've decided to go down that path, if you have clients or if you have friends that smoke, for example, let's just take this as an example, but you have maybe been able to quit smoking out of sheer willpower. Okay, I'm deciding I'm going to quit smoking, and you make it happen. And then you go around telling people, hey, you can quit smoking just by using your willpower. You can do it. And when they're around you in your aura, they will probably believe you. And you're going to put that pressure, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, but if you're listening to this episode, bear this in mind. Keep that in mind. If you have a defined ego, that whenever someone is around you, what can happen is that you influence them and they will feel like they have the biggest and strongest willpower on this planet because they amplify your ego. They amplify your willpower. They may feel stronger than you even feel in your willpower at that moment. But as soon as they leave your aura, give it a few hours, give it a few days, it will come down crashing. And this is also what we said when we host the retreats. We always mention, hey, we are an ego manifestor and we are an ego projector. And during this retreat, you may feel an immense amount of willpower and you may feel like you can go home and accomplish your entire to-do list that you've created during the retreat. But don't expect this to happen, and just be mindful that this is a disclaimer you should give to people if they feel like they have all of this will to do something or to stop something, that they just understand, hey, this is just the mechanics, this is the energy at play, because otherwise what happens is that they will be very disappointed and feel very guilty. And we don't want that. We don't want people to feel guilty because it's not something that they can do. They can't do anything about it. All we can do is to be aware of it and to have understanding regarding these aspects and, yeah, to accept everyone as they are.
All right, guys, we've been kind of all over the place. We went from open to defined. Now we're going to hop back to an undefined ego, meaning that you have a gate in the center, but you don't necessarily have consistent access to willpower. This makes up about 63 to 65-ish% of the population with an undefined ego, meaning that most people are not designed to rely on willpower alone. Wild. So like you were saying, Miko, the saying that everyone has said, where there's a will, there's a way. Literally more than half of the population cannot survive like that. But the not self of the undefined ego is proving, right? Like you need to prove yourself. So what does the healthy undefined ego look like? Someone with An undefined ego does not have to push themselves into commitments that require consistent willpower. You should also be able to recognize that your worth is not based on external success. And lastly, you can guide others in understanding self-worth and competition correctly. There's a lot more of going with the flowness and listening to other parts of your body, whether it's that emotional wave, your gut instinct, or your spleen, expressing what it needs in that moment or allowing yourself to work through that wave rather than just relying on your heart to pull you through an instance. On the unhealthy part of that, it can feel like you have to overcompensate and push through exhaustion to be recognized, taking on challenges that are not correct for you just to prove yourself, and then struggling with feelings of either inadequacy or insecurity around all of that as well. So there is a healthy way to do all of this, but I've seen probably more examples of people living in the unhealthy ego and the shoulding on themselves in those instances to be better, to do better, to be seen, versus listening to the rest of your body that's actually telling you what's correct for you, rather than focusing on, I need to make it through this, willpower, 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 when really it's not there. And truthfully, even when it is there, it may not be for you all the time. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, any other thoughts on the undefined ego center?
Yeah, I think I want to go quickly back onto where there's a will, there's a way, because I think this is a heavy conditioning. And we're seeing this with especially our grandparents' generation. It was always you have to, there's no choice. If it's for the family, for example, you have to show up, you have to go to work, you have to do all of these things. And often we're still falling into this, that we feel obliged to do certain things. And we make promises because of social conditioning instead of really listening to what we want and what we need. And this also comes down to marriage. So if you think about it, 70% or 65% of the population shouldn't say, till death do us part. Because it's a promise. You're making one of the biggest promises there is. And most people shouldn't be doing that. So going back to the undefined center, we have 4 gates in the ego center or the heart center. We have gate 40, which represents the stomach. It is also known as the gate of aloneness, which means that if you do have this gate, especially if it's in a prominent position in your chart, then you need alone time. So even if you are manifesting generator with a 5th line profile or whatever it may be, you still will need alone time. And you also, of course, have to check the planet that is defining this, but some element of alone time is going to be important to you. This gate represents the willpower to provide. We have gate 26 as well, which represents the thymus gland. And that is called the gate of the egoist. It is about trying to be the best. It's not about trying to be the first, or to be first at something, but it's trying to be the best at something. And this gate is about being the salesperson / marketeer. Gate 21, we're going to be talking about that one too, because we have someone with gate 21 today, is about the heart. And it is the gate of the hunter / huntress. And it is about wanting to be in control. We have gate 51, which represents the gallbladder. Yes.
Because we also have someone with a gate 51 in the house.
Which we're also going to be talking about, yes. And that is the gate of shock. So it represents the gallbladder, and it does have a competitive element to it and a desire to wanting to be first. So if you have one of those gates defined, whether in an undefined or a defined heart center, let's take a look at the undefined heart center first. So if you have one of those gates, but you have an undefined heart center, be very, very mindful to use your undefined heart center in a healthy way, which means don't run after wanting to prove yourself. Don't try to avoid feeling worthless. Because you are worthy, no matter what design you have. And it's really about not wanting to prove yourself, not making promises to anyone. Try to make less promises if you're listening to this and you have an undefined heart center or an open heart center, if at all. Like the suggestion from Ra Uruhu is don't make any promises. These are the things that you need to look out for, because otherwise, if you have one of those gates defined, it's going to attack one of those organs in your body. So either gate 40, the stomach, gate 26, the thymus gland, gate 21, the heart, and gate 51, the gallbladder. If you have the ego defined and you have one of those gates defined as well, make sure that you're using your ego authority, if it's an ego authority, according to your strategy and your inner authority. So if you are an ego manifestor, make sure that you inform before taking action. Make sure that you know that your heart center, your ego, your willpower is activated by asking yourself, is this really for me? Is this really what I want? This is the key to an inner authority, an ego inner authority. Is this something I really want? Because if it's not something you really want to do or want to experience or whatever it may be, then you're going to strain your organs, depending on which one is defined. If you're an ego projector, same thing. Just follow your strategy, follow your inner authority. As a projector, you need to wait for invitation, and then you need to figure out whether this invitation really feels like something you desperately want to do. This is what it feels like to me. It is I want to do this and nothing can stop me.
I would agree. Similar feelings of the pull towards something when it feels like a fuck yes, I want this in my life. But also, I think on the opposite note of that, there are some times where it can be very unclear as to what the right yes feels like. So, at least in my experience, it can be very unclear. And I think that has a lot to do with like the lack of connection to the body itself as well. So that's also something to note.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because just before this episode, I was watching a podcast with someone who was talking about her ego authority, and she was also feeling like it wasn't directly connected to her body. I understand what she's saying. So there is no response mechanism, as in with the generators, where you can ask them questions and they have this inner response that comes out. With the ego, it is more of a, I don't even know how to describe it. It's
for me, it's like when you know, and there's no other choice. It's very clear when you know, but there's sometimes it can just be muddy and the answer is unclear. I mean, neither you nor I have any other centers to rely on to make decisions, right? So like, if something is unclear and we've still made a decision on it, it may not feel right until later. It's just such a weird thing.
So what I've noticed, for me, it is usually extremely clear. When I feel something is right, it is very clear. It is very right. There are certain situations where things are not so clear, and I think that happens when I'm clouded by other emotions or by other external circumstances where I just have a difficulty connecting with my heart. But most, like when I know something for sure, there's nothing that can deter me. I can say this, for example, when I got my tongue pierced when I was 17. I was like, Mom, I need to get my tongue pierced. There was no way around this. And my mom had to go talk to my father, and she was like, so your daughter wants to get her tongue pierced? And it's kind of like, if you don't support me on this, I will go no matter what. We can do this together or we will do it separately. Like, this is, I will find a way. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's not really the best example, but...
Okay, I guess a slightly better example. Last year when I applied, 2 years ago now, when I applied to the current position that I'm in, I had a massive heart pull after like the first interview. And I was like, dude, if I get this job, yes, like this is exactly what I need. And I couldn't tell you why. I didn't know why in the moment. I just was like, yes, I need this right now. And like a year later, I can tell you, yes, all of the great experiences that I've had, the great people that I've met, and the learning lessons that I've had were the reason I had the heart pull towards this. But on the contrary, leaving the position, I did not have a heart pull towards, but I still knew it was the right decision, if that makes sense. So that's what I mean by sometimes it can be a bit muddy. So do with that what you will, guys. But I think the more you can feel into your body, and this is what I was saying before, I think last year I was more physically connected to what felt like a yes or no in my body because I was resting adequately. I was taking care of myself in different ways. But also, this position has led to less sleep, more stress, less connection to my physical self. So less of a heart pull. So I think that that's also, again, just something to note because you can have this massive heart pull towards something and maybe there's a lesson learned in it. However, that same something that you had a heart pull towards can also be potentially detrimental to being able to actually feel into future heart pulls. So it's the world is a weird thing. Our bodies are a weird thing. Human design is a wild thing to be able to understand it.
One other thing that I think is important here is to understand the type of connection that we have. So if it is as an ego manifestor, like a pure ego manifestor, being connected directly to the throat with the 4521 channel, there is a lot of truth that you can hear in the voice. And I have heard from someone that passed away and that was very well liked in the human design community. That's Human Design Hawaii or something. I'm not entirely sure, but he was really good. I love his teachings. And he said that you will hear it in the voice. So for a 4521 ego manifestor, you will for sure hear it in the voice. And you can also tune yourself to hearing what your yes feels like. And I can hear in your voice when you don't want to speak or you don't feel like talking. And I can also hear it in my voice that there are certain subjects where I'm like, okay, I don't feel prepared enough. I don't feel right in talking about this right now, but we've scheduled the session, we've scheduled this recording. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. But there are times that I don't feel like it should be the right time to talk about it for some reason or another. And when you attune yourself to hearing your own frequency, your own resonance in the voice when you're talking, you will hear whether this is for you or not. And sometimes it's really, you need to talk it out until you come to that conclusion. You're like, okay, let me just ramble. And then at some point you're like, oh yeah, I hear it. Oh, this is the right decision. How do you feel about that?
I agree. I think that remember that one time that I called you? I was like, dude, I feel like I'm not in my body and my body is just like speaking for me. Remember that? That was weird. So yeah, no, it has happened. It does happen. And I think you're right. Even when going back and like editing these episodes, there are some times where we're like totally in it and sometimes where we're like not super in it. But because we've both committed, we're like, this is our recording time. We are both egos. We need to do this. Our word is everything. And we just show up and we do it. Question for you. So gate 40 being aloneness, because it's not connected to the throat, that gate wouldn't necessarily, or someone with that gate wouldn't necessarily need to, or know that they need to be alone, right? It's not something that they could necessarily inform about. It would kind of just being more of a retreat, and not necessarily a 2-line retreat, but a different kind of retreat. Or if they were a 2-line and had that, it would be a deep retreat. So I'm just wondering, would that person necessarily be able to, as a manifester, I have that. And I'm pretty good about like saying, yo, I need my alone time or like I need my space. But I wonder if someone would be able to inform on that if they had it also had their throat defined, but maybe because it's not connected, they wouldn't be able to put two and two together. I don't know. That was a really random question.
Good question. We would have to find someone, an emotional projector maybe, that has this design without the throat defined.
Uh,
So just the 4037 channel, that would be an interesting one. I feel like they don't necessarily need to communicate that. They often intuitively know that, depending on whether it's conscious or unconsciously defined, but it is part of their bargain. So for a 4037, it's really a lot about, okay, these are the rules and guidelines of our relationship. You do X, Y, Z, and I do, I don't know, the other part
ABC.
of ABC. Very good. Well done. I was like, W. ABC. Yes, you do ABC, I do XYZ, or the vice versa. You need to be very clear as to what each one does. So, for example, if one party says, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to bring home the money, and you're going to take care of everything at home, that's a very clear bargain. But additionally to that, when I go to work and I'm going to work like a crazy person, I'm going to do all of this effort, I want nice food to be ready, but I also want my alone time. So there needs to be this nice balance of you take care of me if I take care of you, but additionally I also want my alone time. And I feel like a lot of times you just feel that. So I've been working with someone in Saudi Arabia for a very long time, for 7 months, and I've gotten to know his energy very well. It was very easy to navigate because we knew, both of us, I mean, we were two projectors, but we intuitively knew, okay, this is going to be an easy ride on the way in. We need our alone time, and we meet whenever our paths cross. It wasn't any kind of obligation of we have to go to lunches and to dinners and whatever the case may be as colleagues, that a lot of times some people, they feel like, okay, we need to do everything together. But it was not at all like that. So
Interesting.
that was, I mean, it's going to be, of course, very different from person to person, but I think it's more of a, once you've talked about it, maybe you need to talk about it, but a lot of times you would just sense it, you would just feel it.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's fair. When you were explaining that, I thought of the two people in my world who are both 2 4s, one with a full channel, one with just a hanging 40. And yes, everything makes sense based off what you said. And I think it does feel that way energetically, and it kind of just is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So let's take a little bit of a look at the pure ego projector. There is only one way you can be an ego projector.
You are the one and only way you can be an ego projector.
Well,
let's
my
look at
channel.
our resident ego projector.
My channel is the only way that you can be an ego projector if everything else below that channel is undefined. So you cannot have your spleen, your sacral, obviously, your emotional solar plexus, or your root defined. Otherwise, you wouldn't be an ego projector. However, whatever is defined on the top, that can vary. So you can still have everything above your ego defined, and you can still be an ego projector depending on how things are connected. That being said, your G center in this case cannot be connected to your throat if your ego is defined. And this is going to be an interesting twist, because a lot of people, they may see a manifestor and they only look at the motor being connected to the throat as a manifestor. But if you have an ego defined and everything else is undefined, and your ego is connected like the projector from the channel 2551, then if you are connected through any of the G center throat gates, so that could be the 31-7, the 33-13, the 8-1, or as well a channel that goes from the 10th gate to the 20th gate to the throat. Those, if you have the ego defined, connected to the G center, and any of the other 4 defined, you are an ego manifestor, because the heart motor goes through the G center into your throat, connecting your ego with your throat, making you a manifestor. And we're going to go look at the different kinds of definitions in that as well, but let's keep it simple for the moment. Rewind, because that was a bit complex if you're not watching. I'm going to be showing the examples if you're watching, just to make it a bit more clear. But we're going to take a look at the ego projector first. So here you can see an ego projector chart. Don't know whose it is, but you see the 2551 channel defined. So it's this channel here going from the ego to the G center. And this is about shocking people into transformation. That's what this channel is about. It's really about wanting a transformation to take place in someone else, but you can't just initiate. You're a projector, okay? As a projector, you don't initiate shocks. Or you shouldn't try to initiate shocks, because that ends up in a very bad direction. So you need to be invited to shock people. However that invitation looks, you then need to listen to your inner authority, to your heart, and see, is this right for me? Is it right for me to shock this person right now? Does that feel good? Is it a hell yes in my heart, no matter what happens, I'm going to stick with it and I'm going to run through 50,000 walls if I have to? That's what it needs to feel like. And to me, this is what it feels like. However, what happens as well sometimes when you do have this channel, you may end up in someone's presence and shock them without even saying anything. So this is another thing that can happen. This shock channel or this transformation channel can really be a lot for people. But sometimes this transformation just takes place just by them seeing you or feeling your aura. So that's something to keep in mind.
I didn't experience this fully until I met you. And
great addition. No, I'd love to hear, because I don't know what it feels like.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so I think shocking can like feel bad, right? Like, oh, so shocking that they did this. But I think shock can also be a good thing, as in like surprise, as in like, wow, she's bringing this element into X, Y, and Z, which is really, really cool, you know? So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I feel like it kind of maybe gets a bad rap because it's unexpected. But I think unexpected can also be a positive, if that makes sense. So the first time you and I met in person, I don't know if I felt this, but I can tell you the first time that you and I were just like in the same room in silence is the first time I felt my heart illuminate like crazy. And I think you asked me before if we define all 4 together, and we do, because I have everything else. So we have a heart on overdrive together, dude, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. So again, it just feels like a sunburst when you and I are physically in the same space. And it's very interesting.
Now that you've mentioned it as well, what also happens is that you don't just shock others. And yes, the shocking can be, I feel like when you're living in your shadow, it can be very hurtful, very painful. If you are expressing it in your light aspect, it's more of you need to take a look at that. So, for example, what happens with my clients when they are facing a challenge, I like to point out their challenges, their shadows, and I kind of like to be like, hey, this is something that you should really take a look at, and you need to heal that. You need to face it, because if you just keep hiding it away, there's not going to be any growth and no expansion to that. And to me as well, it is taking this leap into the void. So what I would often do in my life, when I'm so convinced of doing something, it doesn't matter what anyone else around me says, even if logic, quote unquote, says you shouldn't do that. If the mind says, okay, everyone else has failed before you at doing that, why would you think that it's going to be different for you? And I'm like, yeah, because I feel it. Like, this is for me, when I feel it, when I feel this, I need to do it and I want to do it, I will do it even if everyone else has failed before. And it's this shock, this jumping into the void. I often see it as the fool in the tarot card, leaping off that mountain into this void and not knowing if something or someone is going to catch you or how deep that cliff really is. This is what it kind of feels like to me. So yes, it can be, but it's, for me, it's always it could end up bad, but I'm willing to take that risk. Even if it turns out bad, I know that there is no other choice for me. It's that or nothing. Like I have to. It's like an obsession.
So interesting.
So let's take a look at the ego manifestor. This is not Celestina's chart, but this is a pure manifestor that we're going to be taking a look at, just for you to know what a pure manifestor looks like. It's this 2145 channel. That is the purest version of an ego manifestor. I don't know if I mentioned ego manifestor because there are other manifestors out there, but it is really an extremely strong force to reckon with. It is a leader personality. It is the voice that says, I have or I have not. It is often an I have to be in control. It is the king or queen, and it is someone that is leading the tribe, but they should stick to leading. They shouldn't try to do everything, because they're here to be the king and queen and not to be... There was such a funny example in the book of Ra-Uruhu about, I don't know if it was the Manifestor book or the Manifested Channels or whichever it was, but he was talking about a king being a plumber. So a king isn't going to go around trying to fix pipes of the kingdom. He needs to tell people that they need to go fix the pipes. And this is something that is super important to this kind of manifestor, the 4521. They're here to actually teach the tribe what to do. They're here to educate the tribe what to do in order for each of them to be able to absolve all of the tasks that they have. So each one of them needs to learn, okay, hey, in Celestina's example, she was managing a restaurant. So if she has a dishwasher, she may be standing next to him, and I know that she does. She stands next to him or her, and she teaches them exactly how to wash the dishes. If this was someone that never washed dishes before, for example, she teaches them exactly this is how you should do it, and she will observe them for a while, maybe 2-3 nights in a row. And once she feels like she can trust them, once she feels like this is something that they are capable of doing, she will then step away. And this is the perfect way that a manifestor with the 4521 channel should work. It's not about continuously trying to do the work, but it is about teaching and educating their team or their tribe to do each of the positions, to work in each of the positions in the best way possible, hiring the right people to do the job, but also helping them become the best people for this job. And the reason why they're doing that is because they need this time alone, of course. They can't work 24/7. That would exhaust the ego. The ego needs breaks. So if you do have an ego inner authority, make sure you take breaks. Make sure you don't overwork yourself. Make sure that you don't try to do everything yourself, and delegate the work to the right people. This is super important, especially for this channel. The other thing is that they do this in order to reap the benefits. So it is about as well getting a solid foundation. When you do have the inner authority, the ego inner authority, material wealth is important to you. It is important to you to have a solid income and to increase that income if you're an ego manifestor as well. To have, with this channel, to invest into something. So Celestina, yes, she will work very, very hard, and she could keep on going on this because the 4521 channel has a tendency to keep going. it is very hard for this channel to stop going. And this channel is actually best when it is an electromagnetic, because when they come together, they can work. But when they're all in one design, when you have this channel in one design, it may feel like you don't know when to stop. You can't, and especially in Celestina's case, because she has an undefined sacral as well. She has an undefined spleen, actually completely open spleen, I believe. So there is this with the undefined sacral. I don't know when enough is enough. And the completely open spleen, she may have the tendency to hold on to things that are not good for her for a longer amount of time than is necessary. So with this 2145 channel, it can feel like an enormous pressure of just saying, hey, I need to pause. Instead, she wants to keep going. But the interesting aspect here as well, it's really about taking in the tax money, taking in the benefits from your team, investing into something for a short amount of time, putting in all the work, putting in all the effort, but in the end to reap the benefits. So there is nothing better for a 2145 manifestor to 10 years from now still receive benefits from what they've put the effort into 10 years prior. So it's really a building up on their effort. It's more about, so actually what you thrive in would be a job that pays you more and more. It's not a job that gives you one salary for the rest of your life. You would go crazy with that probably. But it's really about putting in all the effort, educating everyone, and then having the team run by itself and reaping the benefits. How do you
just
feel
described
about
my
that?
last year in a nutshell. However, it's interesting though, because I actually don't care about the money. I would do it if there wasn't any money, if that makes sense. So I feel like that to me is whatever. It would be really cool to be able to long-term reap the benefits of the effort that I've put in now, right? Like that piece resonates. But like right now, I would still do the job that I did the last year without the money.
But you
Because
have
my
the
heart,
safety as well.
yeah, I do have the safety. Yeah.
So I
So
think without this, yes, I know that you do things because your heart is in it. That is for
yeah,
sure. But it's also in the long term, and you knew that this wasn't going to be your forever job. Your
Yeah, I
forever
think
job.
yeah, I think that you're right that they're like one, the safety and security piece of it with David's job definitely makes a difference. But I think because in this job in particular there was such a massive heart pull that I knew that something needed to be there. And it's interesting because there was definitely some potential for like residual income with this, but there were also so many negatives that I overlooked for so long. Like, think toxic relationship, like negatives that I overlooked for so long. And this is also a point that you made, right? Like staying in something longer than you quote unquote should because there are other aspects of it that just light you up. That was a significant piece with this position. So yeah, it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head with that. Also, I could see how this channel could be better with electromagnetics rather than it just being a singular channel. I feel like, because then that gives you the time to break apart and then that's actually your downtime. Whereas for me, I always have anxiety about working, right? Because my like work day doesn't start until the nighttime. So literally my entire day I'm like, what do I need to do now for tonight? And like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just in my head, in my like amping it up the whole time. And I can't even get out of that fight or flight mode even when I'm off work. So it's a very interesting channel to have.
I'm just
Yeah.
looking at your chart right now as well as an
Yeah.
expression of it. While the planet placement plays a role as well, and additionally, it's not even a fully conscious channel. So it is a half conscious channel. the hunter, the huntress, the person gathering all the materials is unconscious in you, and it's in your Mercury. And the king and queen is in your conscious sun. So, and it's in your Venus as well. So it's really something that is very important to you on a values scale. But yeah. I can I can see how that can be challenging.
Yeah. It's a lot. It also feels like it's my responsibility. When I take something on like that, it feels like it becomes a part of me, whether it's my baby or not. You know what I mean? It's a very interesting relationship I have to the things that I build and am a part of. Yeah.
So these were the obvious ego projectors and ego manifestors. However, I would still like to touch on the other ones because I feel like these are very difficult to find information on. So if you are an quote-unquote indirect ego manifestor, I feel like this is where a lot of you are struggling a lot to find the right information. So now we covered the 4521 channel, which is also just keep that in mind if you are an ego manifestor, that it's not about asking permission, but it's about informing. Very important. If you do have a 4521 child, just definitely keep that in mind, that they try to tell them, hey, tell me what you're planning on doing, and then you can probably do it. And even if you then try to tell them not to do it, they will probably do it. So just make sure that you have very, very objective arguments at hand that could potentially make sense to them. Otherwise, yeah, they're gonna do it. Imagine you have the 2551 channel defined, and then you have the 317 channel defined. So this is the channel of the alpha. It's about leadership, and it is really about a collective leadership, which is guiding others towards the future. So we will also be talking about the other side of this leadership, the abstract leadership that is more about the past. This is the logical leadership that is more about the future. So what that means for you as an ego manifestor, you can initiate, yes, you are a manifestor, but when it comes to leadership, you still need to get invited into a leadership position. You can't just lead because you want to lead, but you need to be invited into a leadership position. So your ego may tell you, hey, we want to initiate this. But what I also find interesting is that even as a manifestor, you need to wait. You need to find patience, because you need to find those moments of, yes, my heart is in it. They're not everywhere. They're not going to appear every day. You just heard Celestina say that this doesn't happen very often, but when it does, she knows, okay, I want to do this. So and it doesn't, to me as well. It takes a while before I get the right type of invitations. But when I do get the right type of invitations, I'm like, yes, this is what I want to do. So keep that in mind, that even a manifestor needs to wait out the right moment to initiate, or even before initiating, to inform about their future or their upcoming initiation. But when you do get invited into this leadership position as a 31/7, a radical shift can happen in the company or the community or the movement that you're in, and you're most likely going to really guide them into a new vision. This is what the 2551/31/7 connection could do for you. As a 2551, and then going from gate 10, so the G center, to gate 20, this is about really embracing who you are. And this is something that Ra had in his design. He was not an ego manifestor, he was a splenic manifestor, but he had this connection. And he was embodying who he was. He wasn't ashamed of who he was at the end of his life, he was really showing himself just as he was. He wasn't hiding anything. I don't know. He probably didn't share everything about his drug past or sexual past, but he wasn't really hiding that he had these challenges or that he was living out a not self in certain aspects. So it's really about embracing who you are at the core and being yourself, and this is going to motivate others to do the same. This is your path if you have this kind of design. If you have the 2551 and then the 8-1 channel, so this is about the creative role model. It's about inspiring others through creativity and being really uniquely yourself. So it's a bit of a different type to the 2010 channel, whereas the 2010 is about self-love and self-appreciation and self-acceptance. But this 8-1 is about the creative expression of yourself. And it can be through groundbreaking designs or embodying a radical new way of being, but really very, very creative, very different in their way of being. Partially maybe even shocking. It is really about, so it's not about the channel, well, you have the channel of shock in you, so this element will always be in every single kind of manifestor that is defined in this way. So it's about shocking yourself or someone else through the creative process. This is what this one would be about. So it could be, it could be, for example, an artist as well that is shocking with their art. Then we have the 2551 and the connection 3313. So this is the abstract, collective abstract. And this is about looking at the past and being able to create stories out of it through reflection. So this is also about alone time, because you need to retrieve and reflect on the stories that you've heard, maybe through history, but also your own past, in order to be able to guide others forward. This could be through writing books as well, or giving speeches, or sharing powerful testimonials. It could also be a leadership position that is more relying on past information and guiding people by adapting it to the current way of doing things. But it is not as visionary as the 731. So all of them have to do with shocking. All of them are manifestors, but there is an element of needing to be invited into this aspect. So this is the complexity about these types of manifestors, because you may want to initiate certain things, but there are certain elements that need to still be invited in out of you.
In my mind, I knew that this type of manifestor could exist, but the specifics that go into it, I think, are really interesting. That it's not as instantaneous per se, the channel I have. And don't get me wrong, there's challenges that come with that too, right? I think we always think that the grass is always greener on the other side. If we were just this way, I mean, you and I were joking. I was like, dude, if I was a 5-line, I'd crush it, you know? Wow, I've come so far since last year when I didn't understand 5 lines. But now I'm like, yo, I could be a 5-line. But anyway, I think that there are so many complexities, so many complexities to human design as a whole, that this just sheds so much more light on how, like, yes, you can be an ego manifestor, but like there are so many different ways you can be one, right? And even with yours, like how different things can be connected. Yes, you have the channel of transformation through the gate of shock, but also there's so much more complexity to your chart because your ajna and your throat are defined in that regard, you know? So it's really cool to see all of the different planetary placements.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Oh.
It's different to see, yes, the combinations and planetary placements that create the uniqueness in each of us. So thanks for shedding some light on that.
Thank you.
just here for comedic relief and entertainment. That's it.
Come on, you're saying that again. You want me to debunk it online? Okay, I'm debunking it. So,
No.
Celestina mentioned this earlier, that she's just here for comedic relief, and I said, hell no. She gives some really good insight. So please comment below this episode and tell her.
God damn it.
That was my invitation. Yes, I feel like I was just invited. Please comment below telling her how much you appreciate her questions and her personal insights as well, and her other side of the coin to mine.
Okay, I really wasn't fishing there. I was really just trying to be funny. I was not fishing. Just saying. Thank you, though.
I feel like this needs to be said.
You guys can comment and like and follow in the comments and the things and do whatever you need to do down there. Doesn't have to be about this topic.
You know what I also just thought about? Because if you do have the ajna connected to the throat as an ego projector, it gets very confusing because when you're speaking, it's your mind that is speaking as an ego projector, but I can still hear the different voice that I have when I speak my truth. But it's even harder in some instances to decipher whether that's your mind saying things or if it's your heart saying things.
Split definition problems, man. But yeah, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah, not
if it's any
everyone
consolation,
can only have one channel.
If it's any consolation on my end, most of the time I can't even formulate a thought without like taking a second. So be grateful that you have the connection from your thought to your throat.
Yeah, I am. Well, thank you everyone for listening. It was a pleasure being here again today. Yay! If you're not watching, you have no idea what we just did, but you should switch to YouTube. Very fitting for today's episode. Bye, everyone.
Ciao.